Coming up next on the Zapata Brand Podcast, Boxing Edition. This man has been a publicist to elite boxers, trainers, and personalities in the world of boxing. He is known for his creativity and getting the most media exposure for his clients. He has handled Manny Pacquiao, Winky Wright, Freddie Roach, and Jim Lampley. And on June 9th, he takes his rightful place among the elites in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Up next on the Zapata Brand Podcast, Boxing Edition, we are honored to have Fred Sternburg.
Well, fight fans, here we are. Welcome to the Zapata Brand Podcast, Boxing Edition, brought to you by Ringside. Go to ringside.com/podcast, and you too can get 40% off selected brands. Well, it's been about a year since I first reached out to my next guest, and now, this weekend, 2024, International Boxing Hall of Fame inductee, Fred Sternburg joins the Zapata Brand Podcast. Fred, how are you?
I'm great, George. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great now that I finally got you on to talk about your career and what a great one it's been. But firstly, congratulations. June 9th, you go in right alongside in the history books of some of the greatest boxers and personalities in the business. How did you feel when you got that call?
It's funny. I knew the date was coming up, excuse me, for the announcement, but they call you a few weeks earlier or 10 days earlier. So they can get material together for the press release. And so I'm literally right here where we are right now. And I see my cell phone light up and it says Ed Brophy. And I'm thinking Ed Brophy doesn't usually make calls to tell you don't get in. I wonder if he's calling me to say I did get in. Mm-hmm. So I answer the phone and with small talk for 10 minutes, and I'm thinking, that I guess this is what he was calling about. And then he drops the bomb. Mm-hmm. And I think he did it on purpose because he caught me, off balance, and it was great. And we had this conversation, and he's giving me the whole history of the place. And man, I mean, if you can sell a PR man, you can sell. And he sold me. I couldn't believe it. And I'm psyched. It's just been great.
Well, let me ask you, your emotions, was it kind of like I finally made it type of deal? Or was this something that was something that you strive to do? Did you even think, okay, I will be in the Hall of Fame? Like when Mr. and Mrs. Sternburg had their child, John, okay, they had John first, and he's become a very successful doctor. He retires, he's done his thing. Did you ever think your parents would think, little Freddie here is going to go into the Boxing Hall of Fame as a publicist?
Well, there's another brother, Chuck. He's in the middle there, and he was a very respected high school math teacher, and lived in North Carolina and Virginia, teaching school there. But no, this was never the plan. I was going to be a lawyer. That's what everyone expected of me. I went to law school. I dropped out after the first semester, and it just wasn't for me. And I fell into this. I mean, I liked boxing, but I'd only been to one pro fight in my life, and that was up when I was at Syracuse University. It was a Sugar Ray Leonard fight against Larry Bonds. And little did I know, a few years later, all these participants outside the ring who made this fight possible and the event possible, I'd be working with. Like Bob Arum promoted it. Charlie Brotman was Ray's publicist. He was my first boss in PR. But none of this was on the horizon when I graduated from college. I was supposed to do law school. And I never thought I was going to get in the Hall of Fame. I mean, was it a goal? No, not really. The goal for me was to do a good job and enjoy it, and which I've done. It's amazing that they honor you for having fun, but that's basically what they're doing with me.
And I didn't mean to skip over your brother Chuck. I just
That's
wanted
right.
to...
Chuck will talk to you later.
Well,
he was on the high school wrestling team. I'd be wary.
Well, my wife is a teacher. My wife's a teacher, so it's a very respected. But what I'm saying is, it's sort of out of the box. A PR
yes.
for I mean, if you were saying I'm going to be the PR for the Major League Baseball, I'm going to be a publicist for football. That's something that your parents might get behind. Boxing's the wild, wild west.
Yeah, and it wasn't even boxing in the beginning. I went to work for a guy named Charlie Brotman, a legendary PR who ran a legendary PR agency in D.C. that specialized in sports and entertainment. This is back in late 1985, and I started as an unpaid intern. And what I like to say is, when I left 13 years later, I was his vice president of his agency, still getting the same salary. So it was
Smart man.
Charlie he's 96. He's still with us. He still has it all. And those 13 years there, he was Ray Leonard's publicist from his amateur days until almost the end of his professional career. When I came along, Ray was retired. He had fought Kevin Howard a couple years before. And Charlie had a full service PR agency, and they did, if it was a sporting event, they went to Charlie. So he had the annual PGA Tour tournament that came to the DC area, the Kemper Open. He had the men's ATP and the women's Virginia Slims tournaments that came to Washington every year. Restaurants, local fights. He would work with some of these fighters if it was a major fight in town. But if it was sports, entertainment, a trade show, a restaurant, they came to Charlie because he had great ideas and knew how to execute. And it was a great experience because it was a small agency by design. So you got your hands dirty immediately. You weren't there stuffing envelopes and learning nothing. He told you, write a release, and then he'd go over it with you to show you what you did wrong, because I didn't know how to write these things. It's a whole different ballgame from writing a term paper or whatever. So you learn, and then you learn how to pitch. You learn how to figure out what's newsworthy and how to pitch the newsworthiness aspect of whatever it is you're trying to sell to the media. And I'm very lucky to have, started with him, because I'm not sure I would have been in this position now if I didn't have the background and support that he gave me.
Well, then let me ask you. I'm sure you've reached out to Charlie and told him you're going. What was his reaction?
So Charlie lives in a senior facility. He's a widower, and a mutual friend of ours was with him when they found out, and they called me, and Charlie kept spelling his last name. And I'm like, Charlie, I know how to spell your last name. And Chris Gordon, who used to be an anchor on the NBC affiliate in DC, says, no. He's not telling you how to spell it. He's telling you how many times he wants his name mentioned in your speech. And I'm like, that's the Charlie I know.
Well, let's turn to your first outing there as a publicist. Who was the first major one you went to where you finally said, wow, I got to be on my A game here?
You mean in terms of a client, or
in terms of a client where you weren't like, okay, so you weren't a fan guy anymore when you were, this is my company, this is how I'm gonna.
Oh, you mean when I started my own company?
Yeah, you start your own company. I want to fast forward just a little bit to get to that point.
Okay, so now I got America Presents was a Denver-based promotion company. They were a client for about a year, and then they hired me away, which is why I still live in Denver. So that was in July of '98. I left in March of 2002, and then I opened up my agency or my company August of 2002. So I was introduced to Gary Shaw, who was a promoter. He was just starting his own company, Gary Shaw Productions, mostly boxing, and he had been at Main Events before that. So he, after a few few conversations and everything, he recommended me to Winky Wright's attorney and said, look, I think Fred could be some help in raising Winky's profile. Winky was an elite fighter, a world champion twice. But he just wasn't getting those big fights, namely Oscar De La Hoya. And luckily he was promoted by Roy Jones. So he was always the co-main event on Roy's shows on HBO. So he had some visibility there, but he still wasn't getting, the fights he deserved. So I'm with, I introduced myself to Winky on the phone. I said, I'm your new PR guy. And, Jim Wilkes was the attorney and Jim is paying. And he goes, oh, okay. And, he had never had anybody really working on his behalf for PR. So we had like a month before his show in September, which was going to be in Portland, Oregon on HBO. Roy was the main event. And, Winky was the co-main, and he was fighting Bronco McCart for like the fourth time. I mean, I think they
in Oregon of all places.
Yes, and it was a fun show. And of course, I want to make a great impression. So I've got him doing interviews left and right. And a lot of the media who were friends of mine, who had worked with me at America Presents, they all came and helped me out with stories. And Winky had fought all over the world. I think he had fought in, 4 or 5 continents in like a dozen countries. And so I came up with a hook that this is the guy who's, the international. I took the Austin Powers line, the international man of mystery, and changed it to the international man of misery, because no one wants to fight him. And everyone was talking about him. It was like, he was a fresh story because no one had really been pitched Winky before. So we come in to Fight Week with tons more stories than Roy Jones, to the point where the guy running Roy's company is like, where did this come from? And it happened to be Brad Jacobs. Mm-hmm. And Brad and I knew each other from when he used to run USA Tuesday Night Fights. He was the guy that put the fights together.
Yeah.
For, and it was a very, very popular weekly boxing show.
Yep.
So now he's president of Roy Jones Productions, Promotions, whatever they called it. And so they're the promoter. And he's like, holy cow, this is really nice because, Roy didn't have to carry the whole show himself in terms of publicity, because I don't think Roy loved doing interviews anyway. And so it was just an added bonus that all these stories, and then Winky wins. And from there, Winky and I were joined at the hip because he was my only client. So what else am I going to do but Winky Wright, and that people had Winky Wright missives in their email boxes almost every other day. And, we're going after De La Hoya. We wanted that fight. And, it got to the point where, Winky loved it. Winky was a great sport. I did all kinds of crazy things with him. And his trainer, Dan Birmingham, one of the best trainers of our generation, they're all out of St. Petersburg, Florida. And they're like, where's this coming from? They've never seen this. So we had a lot of fun. And then a month later, Gary Shaw is ready to launch his company. And he, became a client. And he had a deal with Showbox on Showtime. And, and as, he got these fighters, he would be moving up to Showtime, get more cards. And so we all grew up together. But Winky was that was the guy I was trying to impress, as well as everybody else. And that's where I started getting other clients as referrals because of what I had done with Winky. Everybody wanted to get the Winky treatment.
So let me ask you, you pointed something out there. You were doing all these crazy things to get him as much media publicity as you can. Okay.
Yep.
What is the key to being a good publicist PR guy? Is it you have to have a good relationship with the promoter or the fighter? Because if the fighter don't want to do something that you're putting out there, there might be some contentious times.
It's true. And I think, and I've had fighters like that. Winky was a standalone client, but when Top Rank became a client, you work with their roster of fighters that they want you to work with. And there's a lot of people there that cooperated, others who really didn't give a darn, and you had to find a way to do it. But you're right. If the fighter doesn't buy in, you're kind of screwed. And sometimes the promoter or the manager, they got to buy into and see the fun of it, but also the benefit. So Winky saw it right away.
Okay. So what do you see if what is the key to that point? Is it the way you communicate with them through the fighter or through the promoter? Which would, if you had a choice to go?
Well, I think it's both. It's not one or the other. I think you want everybody to be in on it. You don't want to exclude someone and think, a promoter or manager is like, what's he trying to steal my fighter? And the fighter doesn't want to, be excluded because he's the integral part of this and everyone's, making these claims behind his back without being included. And you put yourself in both people's or person's shoes. And to me, it just made sense. So everyone's a part of it. Everyone has a role. And you bring in the promoter to support whatever the fighter's doing and vice versa. And in this instance and many other instances, it worked. And we were hounding Oscar and, of course, Oscar's promoter, Bob Arum. On and on. We had people calling Bob, why aren't you making this fight? Oscar's got 2 titles. Winky's got one. What are you afraid? I'm not afraid of anything. It's a lousy fight. No one's going to buy it. And of course, they come back to me, and we're coming. It's like a play. We're coming back with our responses.
Mm-hmm.
There was one guy, Doug Krikorian, who wrote, excuse me, for the Long Beach Press Telegram. He had a radio show with Joe McDonald. They loved what we were doing, and they set up an on-air debate between Bob and Winky on why this fight should happen. So, and I know Bill Kaplan's telling Bob, don't do this. And Bob's like, I can handle myself against Winky Wright. What he didn't know was I had a back door into the whole thing. And as I'm hearing what Bob's saying, you know, without the delay,
oh no,
I'm either emailing or telling Winky how to respond. We're killing him. And he didn't know where it's like 5 people. And of course, Joe and Doug are having the times of their lives. And then they're like, yeah, how about that point, Bob? And whatever the was. And Bob's like, fight this guy. And you know, he's like alluding to, if you win this fight, you'll get Oscar. And of course, I'm like, ask him specifically, will he give us this fight if we beat the guy he's telling us to beat? And he's like, well, no, I'm not saying that. Well, what are you saying? And basically what he's saying is, we don't want the Winky Wright fight. And who could blame him? Winky makes everybody look bad. I'm not saying Oscar was going to win or lose, but it wasn't going to be a pretty fight because Winky was just such a slick fighter. He was great.
Right.
So eventually what happened was I get a call from Todd DeBuff asking me to do a press conference to announce a fighter signing that they had in Philadelphia. And the night before, I'm with Lee Samuels, who's their longtime publicist, and Bob walks in for dinner. And I can hear from the other end of the restaurant, Winky Wright, Winky Wright, Winky Wright. I mean, he had a sense of humor about it. And I think they hired me for these things to get me off their back because I needed distractions. Otherwise, I was becoming Winky Wright. And that's how the relationship with Top Rank evolved into, you know, working with other fighters that they had, you know, Cotto I was helping out with, and Crawford. And, I mean, they had a million great fighters, and I was always the beneficiary of being part of their team as an independent contractor. They were a client. So that's how that evolved. And eventually it became Manny Pacquiao. Right. And I'm sure I'm going way ahead of what the question
was. I was actually,
I forgot about 12 hours ago, but I get a call from Lee Samuels saying we're going to do Eric Morales against Manny Pacquiao, the first fight. And Murad Muhammad needs a publicist for Manny. We think you're the guy. Do you want to do it? I said, sure. So they make the deal on behalf of Murad Muhammad. And that's how that was in January 2005. And that's how my relationship started with Manny.
And that's where I wanted to go. And obviously, every one of your clients are important to you. They were good to you, what have you. Manny Pacquiao is probably the highest profile one you had because it was global. Okay. Yep. So let's take it to the first meeting with Manny Pacquiao. And I talked to Kevin Ioli about the time he met him first time with his little McDonald's tracksuit on, doing his
that was before my time.
That was his one-on-one interview we had with him. What was your first initial reactions to Manny Pacquiao? Did you say this guy's a superstar, or was it just like that could be a regular run-of-the-mill fighter?
I knew the name. I looked him up. I saw what was going on. Of course, everyone at that point knew who Eric Morales was just from the trilogy with Barrera. So, you know, Morales was the name, and Pacquiao had been making a name because of Le Duaba that he took, you know, on a moment's notice. And that was, Le Duaba was considered the man of the 122-pound division, and Manny made mincemeat out of him. And then Barrera. So they're coming into this fight, and it's at 130 pounds, and everyone's looking forward to it. But Manny didn't speak much English, so there really wasn't much for us to talk about. And I had, you know, worked with Freddie before, his trainer, Freddie Roach, because Freddie had done a few Tyson fights, and Gary Shaw, who was a client, had promoted those fights. So it wasn't like Tyson was so accessible to me, but Freddie was. So that's where I started my relationship with Freddie and learned what a great marketing tool he was, because he's an open book. And, he was always accessible to media. And if he wasn't, I'd get the quotes and put out releases and notes and things of that nature. And the media just loved talking to Freddie. So there wasn't a whole lot I could do with Manny in that first fight because I didn't have access to him. The promoter, Murad Muhammad, didn't fly me into training camp or anything. I think I saw him at the initial press conference announcing the fight, and I think fight week. And other than that, we may have done I'm sure we did a conference call with a translator and Freddie. So, but, maybe Manny saw that Freddie trusted me. And at that point, Freddie really was everything to Manny in terms of, he was like a brother to Manny. And, he's in foreign territory when he's training in the States, and it's his little group from the Philippines and Freddie. That's really the extent of his community when he trained in Hollywood at that time. So
did that put you at a disadvantage? You felt?
Yeah,
okay,
a little bit. I just felt like there wasn't a lot I could do. So Freddie to the rescue, really, it helped a lot. And then, I'd listen to the interviews. I think I'm sure we did a media workout at the gym leading up to the fight. And I probably got quotes there too, through the translator. And, but it was a hot fight. And I think the trilogy at the time, they did a combined 1 million buys, which was unheard of for anyone at 130 and below. So, now I'm sure that's been surpassed, but back then that was incredible. So, and every fight was just so exciting. And that first fight, I don't know if you saw it, but it really was, even I had it a 1-round fight with Morales winning. And it was great. I mean, it was just hellacious.
Right. And when did you feel Manny kind of trusted you to say, hey, take the reins over here? Because obviously he kind of makes his rules, and maybe not at that point, but at what point does he say, I want Fred Sternburg to be my publicist and to really take the reins and push me to, a stardom that I haven't reached to?
I think it started, he lost that fight, and it was like a 7-5 fight, 7-5 or 7 rounds to 5. So now Freddie has to go back to square one. He's got to evaluate himself and Manny. He felt he let Manny down because Manny at that point was left-hand happy, and that's all he needed. Marquez kind of exposed him first in that draw, and then Morales did. So that's where they start developing Manny's right hand because Manny didn't have a lot of confidence in it. And Freddie had it. This was something that took a while. So I have a few more visits to camp than I did the last time. And I'm trying to come up with something that people can just grab and just, it's some kind of hook for Manny. And one day we develop a secret weapon called Manila Ice. What is Manila Ice? No one will ever know because it's like Brigadoon. It's out there somewhere.
Well, Manny couldn't speak, so he really didn't speak good English, so he couldn't even when people were asking him about this, from what I read and Kevin told me, he really was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. But that was concocted by you.
Yeah, it was. And then we created this whole image of celebrities watching them work out and seeing Manila Ice and having to sign NDAs, and they can't discuss it. God. I think we did a release with Sugar Ray Leonard saying, oh my God, I saw it. If he lands this thing, I feel sorry for Morales is cooked. I don't know if he can do it, but it's the most unbelievable thing I've seen. I mean, we just went on and on. So this legend is building. And as you said, Manny doesn't totally get what's going on, though these stories do get translated to him by his camp. And I think he was aware of what was going on. So now we're heading into fight week. And it's Manila Ice. What is Manila Ice? Everyone can't wait to see this. And so they have the fighter talent meeting where the HBO commentators and the producers sit down with the fighter and the trainer. And they're like, all right, so they're acting like they know, but they clearly don't know. Mm-hmm. Tell us about Manila Ice. And Manny's English has gotten a little better. He's good with yes and no's and maybes. And they're like, it's the left hook, right? No. It's the right uppercut. That's what it is, right? No. And they're looking at Freddie, and Freddie's just looking down. And they get nothing out of him. They think he's being cagey. And as you said, he's like, I don't know what it is either. And so now I get cornered in the press room later on by Larry Merchant. He says, look, I've got to sound like I know what's going on here on the air. So can you got to tell me what Manila Ice is. I'm like, Larry, if I could, I would, but they'll kill me. I said, I've signed documents. I can't tell you any of this. I just, they'll sue me. And he is pissed. And he walks away. We go to the weigh-in, and the fans are wearing these homemade Manila Ice T-shirts. They're going crazy. It's so we now have something to identify with Manny, and we're just having the time of our life talking. I mean, Manny is winking at me now because he's getting it, and Freddie, of course, whatever the script said, he followed it. And it was this great fight where Manny, avenges the defeat. I think it was a 10th round knockout, and it was a great fight. And then all of a sudden, now Manny's on top, and things are moving in the right direction. I think there's a Marquez rematch, number 3 or 2, whatever. I don't know how many. They had 4 or 5 fights.
And they got 5.
And then he came back with another Morales fight where I think he stopped him in 3 or 4 rounds or something. I mean, it was just all of a sudden the legend's building. And at that point, Manny's got a really good sense of humor. He's a really bright guy, and he's really working hard on mastering English. He did not really like having an interpreter there. I'm sure he thought the image was, that he was handicapped, and he wanted to be able, even when he couldn't speak well, he would just tell the interpreter to hold it, and he'd answer the best he could. But he's, he learned English very well, and it was a second language for him. And he reads it, he writes it. I give him a lot of credit, and it took him a couple of years to do it. So by the time we're past the 3rd Morales fight, and he beats Marquez, and he's got to move up to 35, we've become pretty chummy because now thanks to Bob, I'm spending a lot more time in training camp. And it's evolving into what it used to be, where you used to have in-house publicists, in-camp publicists, putting out stuff for big fights all the time. This was like a throwback because they had stopped doing that. No, it was an expense that people just didn't want to, entail. Bob, to his credit, knew the value of it because he had done it for so many years with, going back to Ali in '66. And, here we are now in 2005, and it's, you either you evolve or you die. In this instance, we evolved backwards to find something that really worked. So the more time I spent in camp, I'm seeing him every day, Monday through Friday in training. I'm sitting in the dressing room with him, asking him questions, or I'm putting him on the phone while he's wrapping his hands, or bringing somebody in to talk to him. And you just all of a sudden get close, and his camp, we all, it was like this little team, and he understood what my role was. And, things just improved with each fight. The more I stayed and visited, I think the closer we got in terms of a really good working relationship. And of course, Freddie and I got along, like peas in the pod anyway. So, on some days when Manny, was too tired or had a rigorous workout, it was Freddie. And, it was all kinds. And, every fight was a big fight for Manny. So that's how that evolved.
Did you ever go to the Philippines with him?
Yeah. I've been there a few times. When we did one of the Marquez fights, we did a global tour, and we went to the Philippines. We went to Mexico City. I think we did New York and LA. And that was the first time. And then I think I paid a couple of visits when Manny fought in Macau, either the first time or both, or might have been a couple of fights. Bob and I would go there for a few days to do some media and put him on the phone and do some sat tours and things like that. And it's a wonderful place. We did things in Manila, and we did things in his hometown of General Santos City, where he had his own gym in a little shopping mall, where an office building may have been, and next to a beautiful hotel, and that's where Bob and I would stay. Before all that, I mean, there were no hotels, and Bob, would go there. I mean, to his credit, man, he just so he could be there. He didn't care where we stayed, but he knew it was important to be there and see what Manny was up to and get the word out. So, but yeah, it's a wonderful place.
So let me ask you, going there, he's a massive star.
Yes.
Is he a bigger star? Well, because General Santos is a smaller community than he is in LA. I mean, how big of a star? He's massive globally, but is he a bigger star in LA when he comes there and he trains and people follow him, or General Santos when he comes home?
I have to think General Santos, and even Manila. When we landed in Manila, there were billboards for all kinds of products that he was endorsing, and his wife Jinky had her own billboards and ads. I mean, they were, and they probably still are, this very influential, uber popular couple. And of course, General Santos City, that's his hometown. So, I didn't get around as much there. I basically stayed either at the hotel or I walked next door to the gym. So, but I mean, he needs people around him all the time. It's because everyone loves him. And, but in Hollywood, when he's training, I mean, there are hordes of people waiting in the parking lot for him to go in and out. And he eats most of the time at this little restaurant called Tina's, right next door in the same strip mall. And it's habit, and he's loyal to her. And he'll take his camp in there every day. And, she probably makes her nut for the year or for a 8-week training camp. But he's just the most generous guy. But he's wherever he is, there's just a swarm of people waiting for him.
Does that ever concern you that he's that generous?
Yes,
okay.
Always did. And I think that's why he went into public service, because I think he eventually realized no matter how much money he made, he can only give away so much to help people. And the role of government, in his view, it should be helping these people. I'm sure that's what the intent was, but not everyone in government is honest. And he was sick of seeing this money not going where it was earmarked. So I think he decided to go run for Congress and then eventually the Senate to make sure this money did get to where it was supposed to be. He wanted to know what was going on. He's a very curious guy, very smart guy. And from what I understand, he did do a lot of good getting these funds released and going to where they were earmarked. So I think you're limited by how much money you have on your person. And believe me, if he could give it all away, he would do it. But it wouldn't be enough. And but the government has a job, and he wanted to make sure the government was doing it.
Well, yeah, he always seemed to me to be like one of the overly generous guys where you almost are concerned for him.
Yeah,
when he's putting his life on the line there.
Yeah, I was a little concerned when he ran for president. I think he was ruffling a lot of feathers and going against the establishment. And there's a history that it's not a good idea to do that in the Philippines. There have been candidates who just couldn't make it to the finish line because somebody didn't like what they were doing, and they were assassinated. So yeah, it was a big fear for him, not by him. He wasn't scared, but I was scared for him.
Yeah, and it's a different country over there. That's for sure. So let's turn our attention to June 9th. You are getting inducted you are the class of 2024 International Boxing Hall of Fame inductee. What's the schedule looking like as you're going to go in?
I think there's a press conference. I think there's a Q&A session. I'm going to a Golden Boy fight. There's dinners. I hear there's a lot of dinners. They had me at free dinner. That's really what it was about. And then I think there's a parade that we get to drive in these classic cars on Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning, and then the induction Sunday afternoon. And by that point, if they're not sick of me, they never will be.
Let me ask you a few personal questions, if I could, if I may. What was your wife's reaction? I know you guys are extremely close. What was that
my
like?
son, everybody was just, they couldn't believe it. My brothers, everybody. It was just, you hear Hall of Fame, and I know there's a lot of different Hall of Fames in different sports and stuff, but this is the big one. And to get in the first time you're on the ballot, I mean, I was satisfied with just being on the ballot. I never thought I was going to go further than that, and I was shocked at being nominated. And yeah, we're all psyched. I mean, we can't wait to go. We'll get in Wednesday night. My son and his new bride, they arrive Friday night, and we're looking forward to it.
Now, your son, you don't want to skip over that. Just got past the bar.
He graduated law school with 2 degrees, a master's in tax law and his law degree in December. He passed the bar. He took the exam in February and got the results in April. He got married last week, and he gets sworn in Monday. So,
well, I'll tell you what, a tax attorney, and never, that's job security right there, because those taxes are never going away.
Well, I'm just hoping he teaches me how to cook the books properly. So,
oh, jeez. Oh, boy. Now that you said that. Oh, God. Well, either way, Fred, lastly, is there a message you'd like to send to your fans, your supporters, the people that have followed you for your entire career, that have helped you get to where you are? Is there anything you'd like to say to them personally?
Well, my being up there is emblematic of a lot of people who believed in me and let me represent them, were receptive to how I pitched them. I mean, somebody had to have voted for me, and to all of them, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for those who let me work on their behalf. I don't get here without my family. It's, starting with my parents and my brothers, and certainly Lauren and Sam and my son David, who passed away a few years ago. This is all, I represent all of them, and it's not lost on me. And I'm sure it'll hit me pretty hard when I get up there to attempt a speech.
Well, one more final thing. Do you any regrets?
Yeah, I should have charged more.
Well, Dennis didn't negotiate for you.
Now you tell me.
Yeah,
maybe I should have had an agent.
A couple poppy bagels and scallion cream cheese coming your way.
I don't have any regrets. This is something I never thought about, public relations. I'm not even sure I knew what it was when I got into it. But when I learned what it was, and I learned from Charlie Brotman, it just seemed natural to me, and he roughed out he smoothed out the rough edges. A lot of guys in DC who really were instrumental in my development. There was a building developer named Barry Lindy who managed some fighters. Mm-hmm. 2 of them were Daryl Coley, and who was an undefeated welterweight, and Reggie Green, who was an undefeated junior welterweight, and they were featured on USA Tuesday Night Fights a lot. But it was Barry who funded all these things, mm-hmm. and moved their careers along. And because Charlie let me work with him, this is where I learned the boxing business in terms of PR. And these guys gave me a lot of leeway to do a lot of crazy things, and the beneficiary was me more than anybody else, because it helped me evolve into the professional that I like to pretend I am.
Well, before we leave, can I give you a Fred Sternburg story?
Okay.
All right. So
I'm not going to cry, am I?
No, if you do that, I mean, you're going to be a mess come induction time. Right across here, I have a vision board. When I started this a year ago, I had different people in different places that I wanted to interview and talk to and whatever. At the top of that list, what wasn't you, because at the time I didn't know you, was Jim Lampley, because I used to train. We couldn't afford the HBO boxing stuff, so I would get a cassette recorder and record at my friend's house the tape on a Sony Walkman. And I used to jog and listen to Jim Lampley, and he fought George Foreman. It was George Foreman versus Evander Holyfield, and he would always say the name George. And in my mind, as I was training, I always said, "Man, I wish one day I could talk to Jim Lampley," whether it was in the ring at the time I was fighting. So I thought maybe there's an outside shot. A guy from Jersey City, New Jersey can get a shot. And I would jog, and it would give me the motivation to go. The top guy on that list, on that board right over there, on my vision board, was Jim Lampley. I reached out to you initially first, and you gave me a shot. You said, "Hey, get more experience, get it under your belt, talk." I then hooked up with Kevin Ioli, who, from me, he says you're his best friend.
Who?
Kevin Ioli. He said he's your best friend, and we talked a little bit. And I reached out to you one time in January, and you said, how about I get you Jim Lampley? For that, I'm indebted to you more than you know, because that crosses off one. Now, I'm not finished with that board yet, but it's one of those guys that I always thought, man, I really wish I'd have a chance to talk to Jim Lampley. He's the voice of my childhood. And just hearing him say my name it's kind of like, it means a lot to me because I met you, and you being in the Boxing Hall of Fame, you're always that good guy, and boxing's a hard time. It's a hard place to find good people. Not, we love boxing. We are fans. It is a tough business. Put it that way. You have to find good people in. You are one of the good guys. And now I could say Fred Sternburg, Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that sounds kind of strange when you say it, but I like how it sounds.
It does sound good.
Well, I do want to add one last thing, if you'll indulge me.
Sure.
Two other people really were instrumental in my advancement. When I left Charlie Brotman's agency to go to America Presents, it was because of a lawyer named Jeff Freed. Mm-hmm. Jeff introduced me to a promoter named Dan Goosen.
Yeah.
And Dan had just started running America Presents, which was a Denver-based promotion company, boxing promotion company. And their star was David Reed, who had won the gold medal in '96.
Philadelphia guy.
Yes. And they had a series on Fox Sports Net and a deal with HBO for Reed and everything. And because of Jeff, and I got the introduction to Dan, and then Dan gave our agency, because of me, a shot to PR some events for them, which turned into a year-long deal. And then that's really how Dan saw me up close and personal on what I could do, and brought me in-house after that. So really, without those two guys, not that it would have been so bad staying in DC, but I think that's really where I was able to go on a national stage and start working regularly on all these televised fights, weekly or bi-weekly. So.
And it's good that you mentioned all those people coming up, because I know when you get on that stage, sometimes you forget, and it's not on purpose. You just kind of, not that I've ever going to be in the Hall of Fame stage. Let's make that perfectly clear.
You never know. Look at me.
Oh, well, yeah, but still, you have the charisma. You have, you're a smart guy. Your family's incredibly intelligent. You made it to the Boxing Hall of Fame. Fred Sternburg, 2024 Hall of Fame inductee this Sunday. Be there, Conestoga, New York. Fred, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you on. I really appreciate everything you've done for me and my career, and all the careers you've helped in the world of boxing.
George, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for watching the Zapata Brand podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and listen where all podcasts are available.